Welcome to the show with Ron, where we look at the context behind the headlines. You see, there's a lot out there that's already been decided for you by the media, by the government, and there's also a lot of AI, just the facts reporting. So it makes sense with the elections and with foreign wars to examine the news and see if we can see what the context is behind some of these stories. So let's get right to it. First, we've got this interesting story here that tells us a lot about why the Republicans have tolerated a person like Trump as their candidate. Because in his personal conduct, in his personal morals, he in no ways embodies the kind of conservative family spirit that the Republicans have touted for so many years. But here we have, of course, the media creating a story and trumping up one of the most outrageous parts of something that Trump is saying, that said, telling Putin he would disregard the NATO treaty, urge Russian attacks on U.S. allies. Of course, it's not exactly true. This is a disingenuous take on the article from a left-leaning source. Not to say that what Trump said is not outrageous. It certainly is. But this underpins, again, why the Republicans tolerate him. A lot of people, a lot of the neocons, the neoconservatives, had a lot of gripes about how European countries, some of the richest countries in the world, with the most lavish welfare systems, Germany, Sweden. I mean, most people have traveled abroad have met a scoffing European country person who has mocked the U.S. for not having free health care, or talked about, all their retirement benefits or how early they can retire. Now, these countries are protected by NATO, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, and that's only increased with the Ukrainian war. So from some of these neocon conservatives are upset that the U.S. has a $34 trillion debt, and they're protecting these European countries, some of the richest in the world. So Trump is someone who is parroting some of these concepts into the media by saying that they expect NATO nations to pay their dues to NATO and to pay a larger amount in some of the richest industrialized countries in the world. But the Ukrainian war comes down to the U.S. taxpayer dumping $100 billion every quarter into the Ukrainian war. And so this is the skepticism over that. Now, I would say that all is a very cynical take on it, but it's very true. Still, for me, on the bottom line, all this may be true, and they may not be paying their dues, but for me at least, I think that the U.S. still should be the world's policeman. You don't want any other countries in that role, and you don't want crazy powers, big powers, China, Russia. We have other countries that have raised their head, Iran, to be mucking around in the international order, the international economic order that the United States created and invested in for so long. So all this stuff about being skeptical of NATO comes from a desire from the right wing of the Republican Party to say that NATO members, maybe they should take the lead in these European wars, not the U.S. taxpayer. Of course, we have appalling and unhinged comments. Again, if anybody takes a little time to understand the context these are said in and what it's meant to imply, they would not have that. They would not say this, but this is an election year, and it's imperative to paint Trump in the most extreme manner possible, which is sort of true. I mean, this is a knock on Trump as a candidate as being disorganized, someone who creates his own errors. You know, we have in sports, we've got like unforced errors where you make a mistake. And in the way Trump conducts himself, his life in all ways, is emblematic of that. You know, we have that. Having all those documents down in his house there in Florida. So maybe you could say, well, Trump did, or that Biden did the same. So, but the point was, you don't give the opposition ammunition to bring to bear scrutiny on you, because they will. And here's another example here. This is there's a lot of these state cases that are going after Trump, and these cannot be pardoned by the president federally. And in fact, some of these people who were elected, they ran on platforms and they said they were going to go after Trump. And they have, and they've brought these election cases. And again, when I look at these election cases, I think they're completely justified as well. So you could say there's some political sense to get Trump, but they're also probably justified. So here's this lady who's come up at the DA to put this case up against Trump. She has some skeleton in her closet. This is a problem. Some kind of affair, that sort of thing. But this is a symbol of how a person, if you put your head up in politics in a big way, they're going to scrutinize your past and they're going to come after you. Possibly, you know, see here, they're mucking up the Trump case by they found this dirt about this lady, and they're going to try to get her disqualified. It's politics as usual. Here's Haley. Again, the media is going to play up the most damning of the statements that she makes about Trump in her increasingly quixotic candidacy against Trump. This is all part of the backstage maneuvering of the Republican Party to see if there was anybody they could get in there to replace Trump as the candidate, because of all those reasons I just explained, in being a disorganized mess, of saying the wrong things in the wrong way, of being his own worst enemy. Even the whole conduct of that January 6th incident where they were trying to stop the certification of the vote last time. It's making a mess for yourself. Here we have something I've talked about, I think, in the last couple of videos. On the other side, we have Biden. Democrats might need a plan B. This is a situation where Biden is obviously senile. Again, I want to make the point, the media is really trying to help Biden. They've always tried to purposely mischaracterize the issue about his age, because it is not about his age, it's about his conduct. The media says 80 is a number, or now it's 81, his age. 80 is a number that's very high, and some people say that number is too high. Well, Trump is 77 or whatever, and that's just 3 years, so it's all fine. They're probably both too old, or they're both fine. That's how the media tries to mischaracterize that. And a couple months ago, there were quite a lot of flurry of articles from different big media conglomerates all saying that same sort of thing. But what's really happening is people are saying nothing about numbers. They're saying, we saw a video on TikTok, or we saw a video on social media of Biden acting senile. And the whole rest of the world is saying this as well. And thus we think he may not be mentally fit to be president, or he might, who knows, he might die before the election. this is a scary thing for Democrats and Republicans. So that's the real story, and this real story is leaking out into the media. And as you see, it came out a few days ago with that report where they were looking into some of Biden's misdeeds or having classified documents at home, and they said, well, he couldn't really be prosecuted because he's not mentally fit, can't remember anything. And there was some outrage, and then of course there were some people who say, well, of course we've seen those videos for years now of him acting senile. So here we have the vice president, Kamala Harris. We have got other people. She's what they would call a diversity hire. You know, I mean, they pledged that the vice president had to be a woman or a female, whatever, and then they picked not from all of the candidates the best person, but then, you know, you have a female probably from a big state that can bring in some more electoral votes, balance a ticket. So see, she's Californian. However, her conduct and her speeches, she's not very good at libbing off the cuff comments. And there were countless articles from really left-wing sources a few years ago playing up the aspect of her staff members quitting, her strange behavior. And at that time, that was obviously an attempt to maybe float the idea that she could be replaced. Maybe she could take over one of the senatorships where the senator had died, and she could be a way of saving face, get her out of there, put another person in there that's actually suitable for the job. And then, even though Biden is, dodgy mental facilities, you have a good backup who could step in as president. See, that the danger the Democrats have now is they're going to say, well, it's Trump against Kamala Harris, this lady. And she doesn't seem like a candidate, even though she's vice president, who's ready for prime time. Who knows? That may change. Maybe they could have debates. Maybe she could look good in the debates where Trump wouldn't or Biden couldn't. We'll see. That's what's so interesting about this year. This is a very unusual, unprecedented year in U.S. elections. So, hey, I'd love it if you'd subscribe to the channel and just click like. It doesn't cost anything. It helps a lot. I'm trying to slowly build this channel. I think it's useful to look into this, to calm our minds. We got a lot of people who want us to get in and march in their parade and be part of their movement. But it's better to, I think, step back and look at what's really going on. Okay, what else do we have? We got the the game. Gosh, what a great game. I'm not a sports type person, but I do love the NFL, the technical aspect of it. It's like chess with humans, and what a game it was. I just want to mention this. I don't know. For someone, I remember when there were streakers. These are not, streakers mean no clothes. If you take off your shirt, you're not streaking. I don't understand what the media, it's the same thing when in the last 20 years or so, you have these clickbait titles about some celebrity being topless. Topless means you can see the person's breasts, but it would be like she's covering it, or she actually is wearing something, but you can still call it topless. And in the same way, I was, during the show, they said, oh, someone's streaking. But then when you read the news afterwards, nobody was streaking. They were running. That's running without a shirt at most. But I don't know what's happening to our language there. Or let's get the real streakers back. And here we have a female shooter at a mega church, is schizophrenic, Munchausen by proxy, who legally purchased AR-15 despite being known to cops for mental illness. Guess the system works. Supposedly in the U.S., we have very open gun laws here. There are some checks to make sure nuts don't get them. I don't know how this lady got it, but usually when these things happen afterwards, they say, well, we followed all the procedures and everything was fine, and she had the gun legally. So everyone in this situation can say the system works. And here's a Methodist pastor accused of dealing crystal meth out of his rectory. Oh, out of the rectory. That's a little joke. The rectory is the parsonage where the preacher lives, not his body. This sometimes is unusual to non-Americans, where each little state in the United States is like its own country. So Jeff Bezos is going to move to Florida, because in Washington State, where he lived, they had a new 7% capital gains tax on sales of stocks and bonds over a certain amount. So Bezos is going to sell a big chunk, $600 million worth, and then he's going to do it right before that new law comes into effect, and then move to another state with different tax laws. So that is the way as some of the states compete, attract a business, and in some cases lose business, depending on their tax regimen. And I think overall this is good, because you have very liberal states, you have very conservative states. Where you have the high taxes in the liberal states, you got a lot of services for people. And you have people who say, we need to give services to people. We need to take money from the rich and give it to other poor people who didn't earn it, but who need it. And then you have a lot of lavish services in those states, and in other states where you don't have that, low taxes or nothing at all. You have a lot of dirt roads, a lot of gravel roads, and very little services. I like it. I think it's better than one rule for everyone. We've got man-made islands. You see these all the time from these little Brit tabloid newspapers. They're always mock-ups. They never exist in the real world. They're just mock-ups that are floated by boat companies that that are trying to pique the interest of some Russian billionaire who would want to buy something like this. And I also get the feeling that most of these things, they're attempts to dodge taxes, perhaps, where you could somehow get your tax residency away from any country. All this stuff where you have floating private islands or big island communities that are artificial, that are not moored at any spot. I think people would be attracted to those as tax dodges. That would be a great problem to have. I wouldn't want to be involved in anything illegal, or even worse, crypto. But I'd love to have the problem of being worried about, I have so much money, I have to pay high taxes. AI starting to threaten white-collar jobs. I don't know where this is going to end up, but I just hate the day when I'm going to have to deal with a voice, a completely computer voice on the end of a phone call, sorting out my difficult tax problem or credit card payment, because all that AI stuff is just created to take an average. It discards the 20% on either end of the scale, and it gives you some average of in between of all the data it's scraped to kind of guess the next thing to say. I think the world, it's going to make the world a little more complicated. Is Putin winning? It certainly would seem so at this point. The media has played up this issue that Congress is not willing to put more money into the war over there. I made that, again, sort of cynical screed at the beginning of this video explaining how, some of the richest countries with the most lavish welfare systems in the world are waiting for the U.S. taxpayer to protect them there in Europe. And I think, obviously, Putin or his advisors see this. They see, whether Ukraine is winning or losing the war, it's a stalemate, is not really the issue. We've seen all the way back to the Vietnam War, wars after World War II are not really won on the battlefield. They're won in the court of public opinion back in the home country. So they see the public reaction, the yawning reaction to the war in Ukraine. They see the very severe reaction against Israel, who had all the hostages taken in conducting their war in Gaza. Of course, to be fair, it seems like in some of the way that Israel conducted that incursion into Gaza was not good for the international impression the media has of Israel. You got to keep that in mind because, see, that goes back and it impacts the public opinion back in the home country. So the advisors there are seeing the public opinion in the U.S. shift, and they're probably hoping for a Trump victory because Trump is again speaking these neocon ideas about withdrawing from wars, not being involved in that, the debt, for many reasons, but the debt being too high. And of course, this is very funny to a lot of Americans as well, because we spent about 6 years in the early 2000s being schooled by the media about how war was bad and how a Republican president, George W. Bush, was a war criminal for starting and engaging in paying for the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So many people, even people to the right of the equation, eventually started to agree with this opinion that was coming from the liberal media. Some of it may have been sincere. Some of it was to make sure that they elected a Democrat again as president. And so many Republicans started to take on this idea that America should not be the policeman, should not pay for these overseas wars. Of course, they elected Obama, who started his own very elective war in Libya, which turned out just as disastrous and expensive as George W. Bush wars were. Media didn't really criticize him that much. So this is what we're up against. So now public opinion is turning against a Democrat president on this issue, much to the alarm of the Democrats and I guess the media that support them in some way. And I want to emphasize, I think it's the reasonable idea to think the U.S., even with the debt it has, does have the means to impact and keep world order as they have done. And by doing that, they ensure the success, the stability of the United States. So you want to fight them way over there so you don't have to fight them nearer to home later. So as I go through this screed about protecting rich countries like Germany and Sweden, I almost convince myself sometime, but I really have to say, yes, we do need to stand with Ukraine and we do need to stand with Israel, because in the long run, it benefits the United States to maintain that world order that we've had for so many decades and we've, invested trillions in. So let's end on AI boyfriends. People getting involved in these chats, just talking back to some AI garbage that averages a bunch of stuff that it's scraped off the internet. I don't know. I think that I guess it's a sign of being older that you can look at the youth and say you are fundamentally different than I ever was. I think that's, there's some generational ideas there. When I was a kid, yeah, I was lonely. Yeah, I wanted a girlfriend, but I don't think I would have ever fooled myself to say like, oh, I'm going to get on this app and get my emotional support. Or we never even heard of mental health or emotional support. That's almost like an invention of the last 10 years in culture that's even an issue. We were just told to buck up and get on with it. There's no crying in baseball, as they said in the League of Their Own. So that's that. I'm a writer as well, and I'd love it if you'd take a look at my book. Young people find their dreams and failures in Bangkok, and then go on to the furthest places in search of something the modern world can no longer give. This is the story of There Are Still Unknown Places, my new novel on sale at Asia Books and on Kindle ebook. It's a tale for a new generation, disillusioned by the promises of the world, wanting to search for their destinies in far-off places. So that's my latest novel. It feeds into some of the ideas that I talk about here sometimes about the disillusionment with the promises of the modern world, as I said, and going off to find yourself in a far-off land, and maybe looking at the world and feeling a little overwhelmed at the changes that are occurring. Now, another thing we do here, last thing, I always take a card off the deck. This is my Art of War card deck. So we have axioms from a Chinese guy from over a millennia ago. Let's see what he tells us today. Travel in the open without suspicion. The strategy here, mask your intent behind an ordinary pattern of behavior. And the basis for this is the ordinary becomes invisible, and the invisible can act anywhere. So if you're planning a big move in your business or personal life or whatever, I think the human being is wired to ferret out secrecy and furtive behavior. So if you just, I think in the military or somewhere they say hide in plain sight. Don't make an effort to hide something, and maybe it will be unseen. So that's our show for today. As I always say, don't go marching in anyone's parade. Don't go swinging. Don't go down swinging in someone else's cause. And just join me again next time, and we can together maybe understand the context of the news. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.